we are live and people are on their way in. So hopefully you enjoyed that conversation with Bill Galsa at Philips. This is a fun one here. So I would say we have a lot of friends of CSL that are part of the programming, but I would say Bosch, without a doubt, is the longest standing corporate partner with CSL. Many of you guys who have been around Carnegie Mellon know that 30 years ago, Carnegie Mellon and Bosch created the Carnegie Bosch Institute. And even before there was a corporate startup lab, we were doing exec ed programs around innovation at the Carnegie Bosch Institute. And Estella has kind of been around a lot of those conversations for a number of years. We finally got a chance to actually do a detailed project together this summer that was awesome. And I've gotten to know Estella more and more and just really always enjoyed her perspective. And as a reminder, what we're trying to do with the end of the sessions today is put into context kind of what you've heard up to this point, right? So we started with John Santelli a couple hours ago talking about, as the global CIO for all of United Healthcare, how the CIO's role in this conversation. And then we had a panel on first customer programs, a panel on CVC. Bosch has both of those things. But then with Bill and now with Estella, what we want to do is sort of put all this into context. And Estella does within North America. She's responsible for a lot of their innovation initiatives. So I think this will be a fun kind of quick conversation to dive into this, how does it all fit in? I sort of previewed it a little bit, but maybe, so if you could double click on that, maybe just start by talking a little bit about your role within Bosch.
Thank you for having me, Sean. I was just thinking through when we first made a connection, and now I don't know how many number of years it's been. And you've always been a little box on my computer until I finally met you, probably about a year and a half ago.
That's right. And now in COVID, we're back to a little box.
I know, now we're back to a little box. But I lead corporate innovation team for Bosch in North America. What this means is I bridge the gap between strategy and operations with Explore Innovation. So I help entrepreneurs build customer-centric, globally scalable businesses for Bosch, and I have a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
I really enjoy it. But part of that is also partnerships. So partnerships with you, and we're looking now at how can we partner with other corporates as well with their innovation teams to really start to accelerate this effort.
Yeah. So maybe to start, because Bosch has a bunch of these kind of programs that you can plug into. Maybe to start, just for one of these internal innovations, talk about like what it would go through from idea to launch inside of Bosch.
Sure. So there's lots of different pieces of innovation. And one of the Bosch tagline, if you've seen our little logo, it says invented for life. So innovation is very much part of our culture. So fun fact, did you know that Bosch files one patent every 22 minutes?
Wow.
So that's the type of investment we make in technology and innovation. So it's very widespread across the company. I can tell you a little bit more where I focus, which is more on, we call it Explore Innovation. So I'm looking for opportunities to bring value to markets outside our core business. How we do this is we kind of layer on design thinking with lean startup. It's very, very highly iterative. Yesterday, Alex Marshall talked about customer discovery and interviewing users. We have our innovation teams go through very similar processes. We're validating the problem. We're validating the solution. We're looking at the go-to-market strategy. So very, very similar journey, which is very different from your typical, I would say, corporate core innovation, right? So we're trying to find problem market fit versus the next generation of development of products. Very different topics.
Yeah. And you guys do a really good job at that customer discovery. But you do it, I think, leveraging the advantages of being Bosch too. So maybe, I don't know if you are going to give an example of a company you guys have done this with, but maybe talk about how you do that customer discovery, with a distinctly sort of Bosch startup framework into it.
Yep. So it's funny because it's regional, but it's also global at the same time, because we really do want to leverage the entire organization. From an Explore Innovation space, I head up, we call it the Grow platform specifically for North America, but we have 8 hubs. So North America is just one of the hubs. The Grow platform is an internal incubator. There's 8 hubs across the world. So what we're doing is we're diving into, for example, customer discovery in North America, but very quickly I can leverage some of the other hubs to take a very quick look at, well, okay, this is a problem for North America. Is it a problem in Singapore? Is it a problem in India? And how quickly can we scale it? So the idea of this network of hubs is leveraging each other's learnings, leveraging our experiences to really help accelerate the validation. And we're looking to build global businesses, which is super fun.
Yeah. So talk about that though. Like, how are things different between, Bosch North America and all these other regions?
I would say methods and processes, it's pretty much the same.
Okay.
What we're looking to do is make sure we're sharing the learnings, and really leveraging that. And that by doing that, we can accelerate. Otherwise, it's one team working on one thing. So what we've done recently is we've identified, we call them topics of interest or search fields. And we have more than one of the hubs looking at the same search field. So we're really trying to cross-pollinate as much as we can. And it's finding that balance between how do we deep dive locally, but also kind of take a step back and keep an eye out on what's happening globally. And how can we start to leverage that? And does it make a profitable business? That's my objective at the end of the day.
Yeah, with as you put it, a decent time horizon, right? I think these are big swings, right? So it's not
these are big
need
swings.
to be profitable tomorrow, but eventually, Bosch is in the business of making money. So
right. So it is. I mean, timeline wise, it varies. The customer discovery portion, we want to really focus there first, and we want to make sure we do that right, as it were. And then the technology, and that naturally comes later. So we're looking at incubating startups typically within the 3-year time frame. I would say 3 to 5 year time frame, and hopefully after that we can start scaling.
Yeah.
So it's a tall order, but got to have some stretch goals.
Absolutely.
It's part of the challenge.
In terms of doing it right?
Doing it right.
So Sue Cohen was asking, how do you measure degree of problem market fit or product market fit?
I think there was a question like that yesterday of how many interviews, right? How many interviews do you know? And it's looking for patterns. I can throw out a number. And sometimes with some of the teams, I have to throw out a number because it gives them something to aim for. Because innovation, this type of innovation is so squishy. It's really hard to get your mind around. So I usually throw out a number, let's say 100 interviews in 8 weeks, and everyone's like, oh, 100 interviews in 8 weeks, Estella, you're crazy. But what I really want them to do is talk to enough people that you start to see the red thread and you start to see the patterns. And that could be 40, 50, it could be 70. What we've observed is if you look at your different customer segments, it's a squishy process. It's very uncertain, I would say, and the emotions behind it is about as uncertain as the actual process itself. So I think teams tend to get to a point where they get to 30, 40 interviews and they're thinking, oh my gosh, I can't find a pattern. What's going on? I've got to start again. And they have this mass panic. What we try and get them to do is calm down. You have a lot of data. Breathe, take a step back, go for a walk around, take a look at that data again. And actually, once you've looked at the data more closely and sliced it a little bit more, you can start to zone in on other topics, interview more people, and the patterns will start to emerge. Yeah. It's okay.
It is true, right? So one of the things I've seen is that this question of how many interviews, right? So in the context of Alex, right, for that first round program, that's a defined program. I think you can answer that. But in the place where you're sitting inside Bosch, right? Like I do think sometimes number of interviews can be a bit of a vanity metric, to be honest.
Yes.
Like, oh, I did 80 interviews and you only did 60. Well, if those 60 were higher quality than the 80, you may have more validated learnings after 60 than 80.
Yep.
But it is, you do sort of know when you get there. Like when you get to a point where it's like, okay, I can predict what they're going to say before they say it. It's like, oh, we're onto something here.
And part of it is actually reaching out and talking to people outside the company. Bosch is huge. We have experts in all sorts of technologies and markets. What I really want the teams to do is step outside the building.
Yes.
And talk to real people, not surveys. Surveys don't count, but I want those insights. And it's amazing what you can learn just from one conversation, but you have to really be listening.
Yeah. Yeah. We're having Steve Blank and Alexander Osterwalder next week, right? And like, and like that is that is the thing that I think those guys have done a great
Yep.
job doing. What's I think remarkable about Bosch is when you guys study a technology, like you really study a technology. Like I remember early in the days of getting to know your innovation group, that there was some technology that you're like, and there's like 100-page report on the technology that the engineers had done, right? So this sort of there's the what's possible part of this you guys have down, but then getting them out and having those
Mm-hmm.
conversations becomes
Yes.
really important. How do you
And
keep people motivated to do that?
yeah,
Sorry.
part of it is kind of getting the people who specialize in technology to really step back and see the bigger picture of where it can be used. It's context of use.
Yeah.
Right, so the technology is great and it can do multiple different things, but let's talk about context of use. And then they have those aha moments, and those are amazing to watch. To have associates come across these aha moments from these learnings are really, really, yeah, it's what makes part of the job fun, like
Yeah.
leading them there, and they're like, I get it, it's this. Um, so that's really amazing.
Yeah, and just for vocabulary for people who may associates is employee at Bosch. Like
Sorry.
it
Yes.
took me a while to like get that didn't even sound weird to me anymore, given how much stuff I've done with you guys. But in the early days, like associates, no, that just means employee in any
Thank you
other
for
company.
translating.
Yeah,
It's funny. There is we call it the Bosch decoder. If you're new to the organization, there is a full wiki site on all the different Bosch acronyms and terms, and they are translated to normal people speak.
that's perfect. Which actually leads to speaking of acronyms, Bosch has iterated on the way you guys have structured innovation a number of times since we've known each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good, right? You're continuing
Yeah.
to figure out the right way to do it. But I guess the question I would have for you is, what lessons would you share with other companies trying to build out their own internal innovation platforms, like you've done with Grow, and before that,
Mm.
other acronyms? What's worked well? What challenges? What might somebody trying to do something similar take away
That's
from
a
the
good
boss
question.
lessons?
That's a really good question. I think from the iteration of innovation, we have to practice what we preach. And that's really what I believe in. So just what are we learning? And we're making small iterations to our own innovation platform as we're learning more and more and more. But what lessons? I think from a North American perspective, we've had innovation initiatives running for almost 10 years now, just under 10 years. Part of the longevity is having executive sponsorship. And I mean, not just by name, but really in practice. So an example I can give is our CFO. She will come to the workshops and she will spend time with the teams and talk about business models and how important it is. Or the CEO will talk about how much he looks forward to pitch days.
Yeah,
So having that engagement, I think, is really, really key. But then at the same time, it's from engaged associates. I found there's small pockets of associates, and most people do. They're passionate about contributing to the future success of the company above and beyond their daily responsibilities. So I think success-wise has really been with the people. The
yeah,
methods are nice, and it's one thing, but if you don't have the engagement all the way throughout the company, it would never be successful. So
yeah,
not a flash in the pan, but real commitment.
yeah. And we're gonna, again, I said this a couple times, but we're really gonna drill into that a lot Tuesday next week.
I'm
So,
so excited about it.
awesome. So Janelle has a question for you. So she wants to know, how far out of your core competencies do you search for innovation?
That's a good question. We start kind of quite close, and only because it's more comfortable for the organization to start with something they're a little more familiar with. There's always this tension between the operational business and what we're trying to do, which is exploring something that's a little bit outside our comfort zone. So how do I get everybody engaged? Is I need them to feel comfortable. So let's start and look at a little bit outside. Let's step a little bit outside our core, and then let's push a little bit more into adjacencies. So that's typically where we start. And then for groups who are a little more open, we will push the envelope a little bit further.
Is it so? Bosch is a big company with lots of different business units.
Mm-hmm.
Is it different from, say, automotive to power tools to appliances?
So I would say the platform is open to everybody.
Hmm.
I would really love to foster some type of cross division
Yeah,
collaboration, which we've started to do, and we've iterated on that over time as well. Um, so from the explore side, we just want to push everybody a little bit further and outside their comfort zone. And that's when, and part of it is seeing what learnings come up, because we don't know what we don't know, and we have to find out.
Yeah, and we've got, I mean, the questions keep coming. I'll ask another one from the audience, and then I'm going to steal the last question no matter what. But do you do any formal analysis of the social networks in your innovation group? Diversity of knowledge, who spans boundaries, who's central connectors, or do you do you, Estella, just kind of know?
That's a really interesting question. We have found there is an art and a science to putting teams together.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is, yes, the functional knowledge and the functional experience, but there's also a mindset part of it too. So the soft and squishy parts of people that aren't functional. So like Stella's had X number of years in sales and blah, blah, blah. But there's a component of that that's to do with qualities of people and mindset. So that's super important. And in terms of networks, it's something I've started to look into. And part of it is, how do we bridge that gap between people and associates who are really good on the operational side,
mm-hmm.
and what makes them successful on the explore side? And is it to do with network? Is it to do with mindset? So there's another study I have running with a professor at I think Texas Christian University, trying to figure out what those networks and what those points are.
Yeah.
So I don't have an answer, but it's something that we're thinking about.
That's awesome. I'd love to stay in touch on that, by the way, but that is sort of not for the conversation in general. So the last question, Estella, that I wanted to ask, is it kind of ties back to earlier, is how does your Bosch venture capital group fit into your overall innovation strategy?
That's a good group. It's a good question. So we have slightly different missions and slightly different objectives, but all kind of couched under the innovation umbrella. The Robert Bosch Venture Capital Group has more external innovation focus, and they're scouting to invest in companies, and they're looking for complementary technologies or business models to Bosch.
Yeah.
I'd say more internal facing, but what I want to do is start to open that up a little bit more and working more with corporates and corporate innovation partnerships. Of course, we're in constant contact and exchange, because I'm pushing the boundaries outside the core. So as we get to adjacent and beyond, this is where I typically head over to my VC colleagues and ask them, hey, I'm looking at this. Tell me what you know.
Yeah.
Tell me who I should talk to. So that's part of leveraging. I think you mentioned it earlier, Sean. It's leveraging some of the advantages of the organization.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say, and I thought Joseph did a great job talking about this earlier. I believe most companies are unintentionally, but systematically under leveraging their CVC in exactly the area that you just said, Estella. Like, I think there is a ton of insight around trends, what's next, how that should inform the overall company's thesis, that if the relationship is set up correctly between the CVC and the rest of the organization, could be massive unlocks. And I just don't see it happening as much as I would like right now. And so just in this sort of search for truth, it's a thing, again, it's another thing we're going to kind of continue to push on, because we think it's really important for that partnership to work, better.
I would say the innovation network within Bosch is well known. We all know each other. So there's a lot of cross-pollination there too, which is part of what makes it successful.
Awesome. And so with that, we're basically out of time.